So I'm here today to talk to you about the idea of India. We each have an idea of India. I have mine, you have yours. We also have an idea of the world. And there's not too much difference between the two if we actually put our minds to it. So what I'm going to do is start with a small exercise. And for that, I need you to get your cell phones out. So if you could please get your cell phones out. I will let you know when to start using it. You have to get into your contact list where you store all your phone numbers. And because this country is diverse and we have multiple identities who live here, I would want you to scroll through this contact list to see names which are different from your own identity. So for example, if you're a Hindu, I need you to look at the non-Hindu names which are popping up, Muslim, non-Muslim, right? And I'll let you know when to start. So if you've got it and we are ready to go, shall we start? So we start. And we can stop now. I think the objective of the exercise is fairly evident. It's that we need to know who and how many different names, apart meaning different from our identities, exist in that phone book. Now this phone, this technology, has become an integral part of our lives. Meaning it's there every day. And as an integral part, it also has the list of every person that we know of, part of that book. So whether it's the family member, their numbers are stored. It's your lover, it's your spouse, it's your colleague, whoever is important to you, who you have spoken with, and whoever is not even important to you, but you hope to connect with at a later point in time, finds their way into your contact list. So that diversity in that contact list is actually the diversity in your lives. Now, how did the names enter that contact list? They come in from our school friends. They come in from our college friends. They come in from our colleagues. They come in from these kinds of meetings that we attend. So if our interactions are diverse with different sets of people, our contact list will be as diverse. If not, it will not. And I've done this exercise with quite a few groups earlier, and unfortunately, we've always had to reflect on the fact that we need to expand our circles of friendship to get in more people who are not like us. Now, why does that happen? Why is it that we are so homogeneous in our interactions with the same kinds of people? So if you were to think of the city of Mumbai, yeah, and think of Ramzan, and you want to go to iftar, you know where you want to go, don't you? You'll go to Muhammad Ali Road, or you'll go to a Muslim pocket, and you know where that Muslim pocket is. You pass King Circle, and there's that aroma of coffee, nice South Indian coffee, which you might not even have, but it still awakens your senses, right? But it's there in King Circle. It's not something that you encounter through the city. You know that if it's Ghatkopar, that's where the Gujarati population is staying. And so on and so forth, meaning our city is so neatly segregated these days. And is it good, or is it not good? So there are advocates who would say that, it's nice to be among your own. And we see matrimonial columns like that, right? But when it comes to the city and the spatiality of our city, is it good? Because when you live in a ghetto like this, you have to conform, because identity is what keeps you together. And then you have to make your identity known and obvious. So if you're in a non-Muslim, if you're in a Hindu area, whether you move out without a bindi is something that is taken note of by the people around. Can you leave without a burqa from Mumra or Bindi Bazar? You might, but then it's at great risk. So which is why when we travel by trains, we often see girls, taking off their burqa and stuffing it in their bags, and then we feel so sorry for them. But why does that happen? That happens because we are forced to live in these kinds of ghettos, which we are not of our own making, probably. But we go there because we think that it's safe to be there. Now, what else happens when you live in ghettos like this? It's that because you're meeting your own kind, it's like that frog in the well, right? You look up and you see that's the sky. And then you jump out of that well and you see the limitless sky. So when you're in that ghetto, you think this is it. This is the world. These are the people. And who are the others? How do I know about these others? So I know of these others from Bollywood. Media stories. And what does the media tell me? The media says, at least in my time, and I'm old, I used to see the Amar Akbar Anthony film, that's my time span. And then it was that the Muslim was this, one who applied surma in his eyes, wore the topi, good-natured, nice guy, very devout, pious, firm believer. These days, it has changed. So it's like the Muslim who's the terrorist, the Pakistani agent, right? The Christians were almost always alcoholics. The girls there, they wore short skirts and promiscuous, easily available. And that's the image that stayed in people's heads. And then we began to think of them like that. Today, of course, our understanding of identities has expanded. So we know that there are gay people, we know there are lesbian people, we know there are trans people. But what do we know about them? We know them as jokes, of objects of ridicule, right? So we go someplace, we are in college, we are in a gathering, and you'll hear the most obnoxious homophobic joke. You know it's horrible. You know it's in bad taste. But you giggle. Why? Because the person who's making it is popular. And you dare not challenge that. Because if you were to, you would be accused of not having a sense of humor. So then you go along, you play along. But what does that do? That letting go of that joke emboldens this person to make even more tasteless jokes, and it can even result in violence at a later time. We've seen that happening in our country. So how do we then get to know this other? So I'm here today. If you hadn't seen me and it was just my name, you would not have imagined a person like this. Meaning I meet people, and after a few interactions, they think they want to compliment me. So they say, Sabah, you're so not the regular Muslim. How is that even a compliment? That's bigotry. So how would you know that there are more Sabahs like this who don't always fit in that kind of framework and that identity that we've begun to see as the only identity of the Muslim? Because who is the regular Muslim? Is there a regular Hindu or a regular Christian? There isn't. There is no one model of what this identity should be. Now, how do we get to know that? We get to know that when we have friendships, when we know people like Sabah, that there are so many others who are like her. And then, of course, there are others who also prefer to wear the burqa or who are forced to wear the burqa. It could be either ways. But how would we know that unless we get to meet them and become friends with them? So that's why a few of our friends, we got together and formed this organization, Parcham. And in Parcham, the idea was that we will build friendships across communities. So we got Muslim girls and non-Muslim girls together. And we started with football. Now, why football? Imagine Muslim girls playing football. Shatters every stereotype you have in your head, everything you hold dear, right? So they are there on the football field, they're playing football. And why football? Because it's this brilliant team game. Everyone is there together, everyone. It's not like you have to wait for a run out. So you're there together, and what you are as a person, there's no pretense. You play it out on that field. You can see that competitive spirit. You can see whether you're a good teammate. You see whether you care about others and the rules and what that game stands for. And then we can have discussions after. Because you see, everyone wants to be a good human being. We have our flaws. Each one of us here has certain flaws we are terribly ashamed of. But what we need to get past those flaws is someone who will help us, mentor us, guide us, be with us as we overcome those fears and flaws. And so we do that through Parcham. Now I would like a quick question here. If all the women in this room could just raise their hands, those who identify as women could raise their hands, raise it high. And of you, how many women have, keep your hand up, have gone out into an open field to play, not the school, college, okay? If you've gone out to play in an open field, you raise your other hand. Like, I'm not raising it because I've not done it. So that's not the norm, right? You can put it down, thank you. That's not the norm, and it's not as if we lack confidence, and meaning we here today, all of us here, are very privileged people. And in spite of that, we are not able to get into that open ground. And why? Because that's not the norm. Women, if they are out, it has to be for grocery shopping, it has to be picking up children, it has to be going to college. It's never for leisure. Or if it is for leisure, then it's the girly leisure. We know what that is, right? So we started this football program for girls, and we needed a ground to play in. So we looked, and we finally found a ground. And we being women, we are used to taking permission for everything. So we approached the trustee of that public ground and asked if we could play there. And he said yes. So we arrived there on a Sunday, 40 girls, ready to play. And we are shocked because it's populated by boys, various groups of boys playing cricket. And we went to them and said, listen, leave. We are to play here and we have permission for that. And they looked at us with like, are you out of your minds? This is Sunday and we get to play here. And they did not move. So 40 minutes we waited till they finished their games, and then we were able to use that ground to play. We started playing 5 minutes. 5 minutes, and then we had this crowd of men surrounding us, like onlookers whistling, saying all kinds of obnoxious things. And so me and this other friend who do not play were negotiating with them, threatening them while the other girls played. But we continued, Sunday after Sunday. But in a month's time, we realized that there are quite a few social workers, there are do-gooders in every community, right? Now, what were these do-gooders doing? They were going to their friends and telling them, "Teri behan ko dekha khelte hue. We saw your sister making a spectacle of herself." And then that boy, his macho whatever, was out there on display, and he would stop his sister from coming and playing with us. And so in a month's time, from 40, we came down to 20. We were really worried of where this would lead. And so then the girls, and these are all 13 to 17-year-old girls. There were just some 2 in their 20s, and I was the elderly person in that group. And we felt, okay, so what? So they said that we won't give up this ground, but we need a safe space to play where others can come in and play. And so they made a petition. They wrote a petition. They stood outside colleges. They stood outside marketplaces. We collected 932 signatures, and we went to the MLA, and we told him, we want a ground. And he was amazed at what had happened just there, that these really young girls from this Muslim ghetto have kind of asked for something like this, so progressive. And these girls, these 20 girls of 13 to 19, 17-year-olds, had created history with the first reservation of a sports ground exclusively for women in this country. What I'm trying to say and what our learning is from this whole exercise is that we have images of people. But the fact is that if we provide opportunity to people, they excel. So those who think that it's only a certain caste and a certain class who can be achievers and get where they are, and what about these others? It's meaning they don't have the capacity. For them, we have to let them know that this group of young girls, they wouldn't have done that if there was no one standing with them. And so how is it that we are going to stand for people like this? And which is why the constitution of this country, which directs us to take affirmative action, to ensure that everyone is able to achieve that principle of equality, which is what we need to be doing and strengthening. So today, as I end, I would like to say that seeing you all here on a Sunday, it fills me with hope. So much hope that you have come here to listen to a TED Talk, to listen to an idea of change, to listen for inspiration. And that is the first step, this need for inspiration. And you will definitely act on it. That I feel confident of. So when you go back today, what I want you to do is think of that one misgiving you have about a certain community, one fear that you have about a certain community, and reach out. Try to understand that fear. Make friends with people, make one friend, make more friends. And we will change this world, one friendship at a time. Thank you so much.